And welcome to day 2 of 7 days of Panto. So we're done, we've got everything working, all the lights are being programmed at the moment, so we've got our lighting designer, he's working hard, and lights are on. The sound designer is on his little desk in the stall, so he's sorted. We've got all the cloths hung, we're now starting to light them, so things are moving on at a pace. Now, one of the things that we've got here is a sound position, which is at the back of the stalls. Great place to have it, dead centre, right at the back. And Stu, our sound op, he's getting himself geared up today, so the Yamaha desk is in. And of course, on that left-hand screen, you can see QLab, and we're running most of our stuff off QLab at the moment. It's one of the things that sort of works for us, and we run 2 systems and they're duplicated, and we've got a hot backup between one and the other. Now, all the gear backstage has now been built, so all the treads, the risers, the high up bits, the low down bits, they're all built and done. Everything's working fine. We've got all the scenery put together. All the lighting gear backstage is now rigged as well. It's conventionals alongside loads and loads of LEDs. Wardrobe's pretty well organised, everything's going together quite nicely in here as well. Those rather strange globe things, in actual fact, are gold and silver mirror balls, and they're hats. So that's one of the things that our dame will be wearing. One of the interesting things today was that front of house, people coming in to buy tickets, and the few that we've got left on sale, we've sold 76,000 of them, don't forget. When people come in, our band is using the bars upstairs as their sort of playthrough day. So this is the first day our band get together. What follows here is a sequence of stills, so I can explain to you a bit about what's going on. Now, pantomime still revolves very heavily on old-fashioned canvas-covered flats. So basically they're timber frames, and then there's canvas stretched out on the front, and that's painted by the scenic painters. This afternoon we started to move all of the band down into the pit. So you can see the way that they're laid out. It's fairly spread out down there because the orchestra pit in the Opera House is quite a large area. And we've got our MD playing keys, who's actually on top of that podium on the right hand side of this shot. So he's actually raised up so his head is visible to the audience. And the rest of the guys sit down on the floor of the orchestra pit, and they all wear headphones, and they view what's going on stage on a couple of monitors. So they can see the view on stage, and they can also see a close-up of the conductor. Obviously, this is the working light in the pit, and during the performances, they play in almost darkness, so all the lights are switched out, and they've actually got lights on their music stands. This is the nerve centre backstage. It's situated stage left, so stage left being the audience's right, and our DSM is Patrick, and DSM, of course, in theatre terms is Deputy Stage Manager, and confusingly he's not a deputy to anybody. He is actually in charge of all the activities that go on stage. The show starts and stops when he says. The lights in front of him allow him to give visual cues to people who cannot wear headphones, so there will be a warning to get ready, and then a light will change, and that tells people when to do their thing. Sound people tend to do that because obviously they can't wear headphones, so they need to use both ears to listen to what's going on in the auditorium. So the sound people, if they want to start the show, a red light will go. The MD in the orchestra pit, same thing. He'll have a pair of headphones, just a chat before the show starts. He'll take them off, and then he actually starts the show using cue lights. The 2 timers let us have a precise running time for the show. So every night the actual length of the show will be recorded, the length of the interval is recorded, and all that is recorded for every single show. So we actually have a show report that we do each performance that tells us what went right, what went wrong. If it went wrong, it includes how do we put it right so it doesn't go wrong again. To the right of this control panel, you'll see a couple of video monitors, one's on, one's off, and we can see in the dark. So we've actually got a monitor that looks at the stage, so even when we do blackouts, we can see what's going on. The other one's a normal colour picture. Patrick, the DSM, runs everything from what we call the book. So essentially it's a script that has very detailed annotations of exactly when everything happens. And Patrick will call the whole lot. Our lighting designer is great, and a show like ours can easily have hundreds and hundreds of lighting cues, most of which are going to be cued by Patrick at the precise moment they need to go. So it's a bit of a stressful job, and actually our DSM is extremely good at it. This picture shows you pretty well the combination of the types of scenery. So this is obviously in working light. So you can see there's a cloth border at the top, which is dressed to look like the scene it's supposed to be. If you look at the right of this picture, you can see that archway and a set of treads that goes up to it. Now that whole assembly is on casters, so it can be wheeled into the wings, and on the far side of it there is actually a staircase that goes up, and you can see the metal handrail. On the other side there's another truck, same thing, it's on casters so it can be wheeled in, and it's got a practical door on it so people can actually enter and exit through that door that you can see. At the back, what people used to call backcloths, but painted scenery cloths, are a standard thing of theatre. Theatrical scene painting for pantomimes tends to be very colourful and very bright, and in this particular one there's some houses, and then you can see a road that leads up to the castle on the hill, and of course the castle on the hill is where the prince lives. Theatrical backdrops and cloths tend to be either opaque when they've got a painted surface and you can't see through them, or they're made of a lighter open weave fabric that does let light through. So in this particular case, the cloth that's at the very front is a black material, and it's been sparkled in those sort of rather strange flowing patterns that go across it. And then immediately behind it, or about 1.5 foot away, is a black cloth that has an LED Cinderella on it. And when you put the two together and you light the LEDs and then you put coloured light from the front on it, you get this wonderful sort of 3D effect. And that's our opening cloth. So when people are taking their seats, instead of seeing curtains, tabs as we call them, but fabric type of curtain, you actually see this. So this is our show gauze, and it's a pretty way of starting the show. This picture's taken from the front row of seats looking over the MD's shoulder down into the pit, and they're setting up the drum kit down there. And as you can see, our drummer Brian is a left-hander, so we've actually got a drum kit the wrong way around, which always messes with my head. And if Brian is ever off and we get a replacement drummer to cover him, of course they bring in a drum kit that's the other way around. One of the weird things about pantomime is that the drummers don't just play for the songs. They're also responsible for all the tings, the tonks, the tinkles as people come in. Fairies in particular. If a fairy makes an entrance on the stage, there's usually a sort of a bell tree that they'll tinkle. And Brian, our drummer, is really good at adding in all these little tiny sound effects. He's done it for years, and it's one of the things he does extremely well. This is another thing that we can do with our show gauze. If we turn off the Cinderella and we turn on the little image of the moon, so that's rather nice. And again, it's just that black cloth behind it to give it some depth, and then the see-through gauze that's got those little tiny dots in sort of cloud formations that are on the front, which is it's extremely good effect, and it's actually very, very simple. If you go to the very front of the audience where the rail is and look over, this is the view you'll get of where our MD sits. And the MD in most pantomimes nowadays does play keyboards as well, and his job is not just to play the music but also to look up at the cast, and if the song is a little bit of a tricky one, the MD will also bring in the cast at the appropriate point in the song, so that he'll look up at them, catch their eye and then nod, and that's when they'll start. So he really is the glue that keeps the music part of a pantomime together. Now, this is the view from the side of the stage looking up at the lights. Now, you can see a whole array of lights up there. We run a mixture of LEDs and still some conventionals, but we also use lots of LED bars now. So those tubular things with lots of independent outputs. And most of them move, so we can actually have a vertical wash of light. sort of a light curtain style effect. We can throw light exactly where we need it. If you look up, the Opera House has got an enormous number of hanging bars, but it's a very busy place and there's not much room up there. If you look from the wings towards the audience, you see the reverse of that sort of castellated front edge of the stage. And what it does is a great job of hiding all the gizmos we've got on the floor. The things on the floor are mainly pyrotechnics devices. So they're actually pods that we put the pyros in. And it serves two purposes. One, it stops the actual audience seeing the actual flash of the thing. They'll see the puff of smoke, but they don't see that sort of flash that draws the eye. And it serves the secondary purpose that it stops a lot of the rubbish that comes out of the pyros landing in the orchestra pit, or especially on the MD's keyboards. Now, if we move stage left again, this year we have a rack of 10 Shure radio receivers, and they're what we use for our main cast. All of the cast have radio mics, and we have a handheld spare as well. So everybody's on headsets. The handheld is really there for emergencies, but everybody's on headsets. And we actually have a dedicated person who looks after this rack, monitors what's going on with all the wireless units, and is responsible for fitting the microphones on the cast. One thing we don't let the cast do themselves is adjust and fit their own microphones. We actually have people do it. So that person is armed with tape and all sorts of other stuff, and they'll help them fit it. Some of them are very good at putting the headsets on. Some need a little bit of help if their costumes are perhaps a bit awkward and they can't get to the back of their neck. So in general, we actually put the microphones on people for them. It's just a way of maintaining continuity between shows, so the microphones are always exactly the same distance away from their mouth. One of the complaints from Stuart, who works front of house, he's our main audio mixer, to the A2 who's on stage, will be that, can you check so-and-so's microphone? They sound a bit boomy or they're poppy. And when you look at them, you notice their mic's got pushed round a little bit further towards their lips, and every time they say P's and B's, it blasts. And then the next time they come off stage, our A2 person will run round there, fix the mic, retape it if necessary, and then back to the wing. They're also responsible for sort of fitting the batteries and sorting those type of things out as well. And just to complete the story, one of our most popular props, an electric toilet. So basically we've actually got, yes, a toilet that is fitted onto 4 wheels, batteries, electric motors, and our comedian Buttons. Buttons, as a character, is the one that never gets the girl. He falls in love with Cinderella. Unfortunately, Cinderella falls in love with the prince, so everybody feels very sorry for Buttons. But he makes his main entrance riding a electric toilet, which rather lets you know what pantomime's about, doesn't it? Anyway, that's the end of day 2. I hope that made a bit of sense. And tomorrow is our technical rehearsal day. So we've got a whole day full of rehearsing. We try everything out, start, stop, fix it, move on, fix it, move on. And tomorrow we'll be doing all sorts of interesting things with flying people. Some of it I'll be able to show you. Some of it I probably won't. We hire in some of our major effects from a proper stage effects company, and we're not allowed to take photographs or videos or anything of those particular items because it gives the game away, and we don't want people to know how we do those tricks. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to show you those. I'd love to be able to show you some of those things, but it practically is just impossible. That's the end of today's episode. That's day 2 in the 7 days of Panto. We'll be back tomorrow with our technical day. That's day 3. So look after yourselves, take care, and I'll see you then.